Now we're recording.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're not going to repeat the first slide, but we're glad you're here. So this meeting is now being recorded. Recordings will be posted publicly in order to make this new program as open and accessible as possible. So IMAC does strive to make EMCO an inclusive space. So if you have any accessibility needs that are not being met, please let us know. I'm going to post my email and Crystal's email. We're the chairs of this committee that's launching EMCO. And you can also send feedback at any time about EMCO to the feedback link there. I want to give a quick shout out to Trisha McKenzie, who is unfortunately caught something that's going around in the world today. It won't be able to be here today, but Trisha is at the Library of Congress and she made our EMCO listserv. Hooray! So she added like 200 something people to this listserv. It took quite a bit of time. But all the important communications about EMCO will go through this list. And so earlier this week, we did add folks, but if you did not receive an email from the list within the last week, please enter your name and address or email address into the agenda under the heading EMCO listserv. I'll throw that agenda link back in the chat one more time for folks who came in a little bit later. So if you're not on the list, we can get you added. How many people are on the call? There are 127 and counting. So in lieu of introductions, we are going to just ask people to please scroll down to the bottom of the agenda and sign in there. We would love to be able to figure out who all of you are, but there's probably not enough time in this hour. I saw the chat. Robert, there is a Google folder for EMCO. More about that later. Here is the agenda link again. And reminder to folks, Crystal, you're a host. Can you just mute everybody else? That might work.
Yes. Let's see.
There's just some background noise. Okay, thank you. Okay, so while you're signing in, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do know about this community. So you were here because you signed up via a registration form and you submitted some information that's sort of demographic in nature. And so we were able to parse out a little bit about who this community is. So could you advance to the next slide for me, Crystal? Thank you. So we are super excited to have so many folks joining us for this entity management program. The EMCO early adopter phase received 203 expressions of interest from prospective participants hailing from 17 countries and 5 continents, including Australia and Oceania, Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America.
Three-quarters of our participants are affiliated with academic libraries. Government, including national libraries, represent 6% of our participants, and public and special library participants each represent 5% of the participant pool. Publishers, vendors, or other service providers are 3%, and 2% of our participants are from museums. 3% of our participants are either retired or unaffiliated with a knowledge organization. We are looking forward to the collaborative work ahead for this group. The registry that received the most interest from participants was Wikidata, and given the robust community of GLAMS folks already participating in the Wikidata community, that's no surprise. Participants also expressed interest in the OCLC WorldCat entities and ISNI. Participants indicated interest in using other registries, including ORCID and the Getty Union list of artist names. And finally, there was interest in leveraging entity hubs such as VIAF and the Library of Congress Link Data Service. We're very happy to see a significant amount of interest from new PCC members in the early adopter phase of this program. If this is your first time participating, in a PCC project, then welcome. We forgot to edit that slide. Jennifer, you're muted.
Of course. Sorry, thank you. So we distributed a significant amount of information through our PCC wiki, where most of the day-to-day information about PCC EMCO will be. And we wanted to just make this time for just asking questions about anything you saw there. So we will pause here. And I'm going to throw the link to that onboarding page in the chat. You're going to endure a little bit of silence while folks think about any questions they have about anything they've read. It would not be surprising if you had oodles of questions, or none, honestly, because things are so new and we're still figuring out this program. So either way, all is fine. Did the structure more or less make sense to folks? There are communities of practice centered around registries. The registries will have coordinators, and those coordinators help communication across the different communities of practice, i.e. Wikidata, ISNI, etc. And then they also facilitate communication up to IMAC and PCC POCO. Hopefully that makes sense.
I see a question from Robin in the chat. How will this build on the previous identity management work? It's a really good question. So previous identity management work in the PCC has revolved around Wikidata, ISNI, and specific sort of URIs and MARC types of work. And EMCO is looking to have communities of practice around each of those registries and coordinate between those registries. So sort of link those efforts together in a way that is a little bit more cooperative, looking to take all that sort of linkable data and start to build the infrastructure that we need in order to link it together in the future. We've got another follow-up from Robin. I've been teaching on information management through Library Juice Academy, and also for the University of Washington iSchool as part of the Introduction to Metadata class. Nice. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here. We love iSchool students. And then Eliza or Lisa, out of curiosity, what are the distinctions between participating in the early adopter phase as an individual versus participating as an institution? That's a good question.
So I'll take a stab. So normally, the expectation is, maybe except for SACO, which has other parameters, but for NACO, BIBCO, and CONSER programs of the PCC, you join as an institution, usually, and your statistics and everything else all centers around you being an institution. EMCO was never designed to exclude anyone who just wanted to start learning and try to experiment, at least in this early adopter phase. And so I guess we wanted to make it clear that institutions should continue to consider joining, but we also really wanted to just open it up to let anyone join and get in on the excitement and benefit from the community and the resources that will one day be generated. And so that, I think we just sort of wanted to track that internally just for PCC purposes, and it wasn't, it doesn't mean anything functionally different for the person participating as an individual or as an institution. If you're participating as an institution, maybe you have other concerns for your own sort of administrative, you have to answer to someone at your institution, for instance. And so that might impact how you sort of come at this. But from our perspective, it's not really that different. Does that seem to track with what you know about this, Crystal?
Yes.
So in that vein, does participating in this project make one a PCC member? We really hope so. That's something that I am prepared to go to PCC Policy Committee and say, these folks need to be known as members now. Yeah, as EMCO members. Any more about that? That's a really good question. Just pause here before we go on to Robert's. And there's a lot of questions. Okay, so oh, I've already lost. Man, chat is going so fast I can't keep up. So if EMCO is an equal program, it should have its own tab. Bob, I agree. We asked, and apparently the way that the website is coded, it's actually hard coded into every web page, which that sounds like a lot to change. And so the Library of Congress asked us to not push them on this right now. And so we are using mostly the wiki to house any information about EMCO, and then eventually a tab will be added. But given everything else the Library of Congress is doing right now, migration and all of it, they've asked to not be asked by the PCC to do this. So, and I see your hand up, Bob. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that I think actually relatively few people even know about the wiki, whereas everybody knows about the PCC webpage. So it seems like I realize they're very under pressure for different things right now, but personally, I think you ought to gently push them anyway, because if it is an official program, it should be one of the programs.
I agree. Thank you. Maybe that will embolden us to take another shot at it.
Yeah, this was brought up at our last meeting, day before yesterday as well. So I think we could probably bring it back up again and see what they say.
Yeah, because we wholeheartedly agree. Nicolette asks, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Nicolette, this is a really good question. How do we join a registry community? We're going to be sending out emails, IMAC members, soon, in the next week or so, couple of weeks, to begin scheduling meetings, community of practice meetings, to set up initial, sort of community of practice, organization meetings so that people can join registry communities and start setting those up. So I think all you would need to do is respond to those emails indicating interest. And then that allows you to join.
Isabel has a great question. Are we coding our bib records as PCC, but then able to create, for example, Wikidata and not a record in the name authority file as is current policy or practice? And then are we creating entities in Wikidata, for example, and putting them in a link in the corresponding NAR if there is one? I'm trying to understand what kinds of projects folks will do. Yeah. So EMCO has to respect the policies of the other programs. And so BibCo and Concert participants should continue to do what BibCo and Concert standards tell you to do. So that means you need an access point. An access point, the way that it's defined is a little fuzzy. And so I think we need to kind of go back to standards committee again and see if we can push a little there. But at this point, we're not saying you can just not ignore, but subvert expectations for what a PCC record is. So that's the most tactful way I could say that, I think. And then did I answer the other part? So putting a link, I assume the 024 in the corresponding NAR, absolutely. Lots of folks are doing that already. And certainly the Horizon Mark pilot did plenty of that as well. So I think that's certainly one thing that could come out of a project. Crystal, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is one of the questions that we are really setting out to answer with the early adopter phase. Is sort of how are these different registries for the same real world entities going to coexist in our data? So I think this is why EMCO has come to be a thing, is because we've got the NAR, we've got Wikidata, we've got ISNI, we've got all these different registries that are all representing people, among other things. And we need to know, sort of in this changing landscape, how we are going to use these different registries in our PCC cataloging. So I think the early adopter phase is a place for us to discuss any potential policy changes that we might want to recommend as a community that are using all these different registries together. So I think this is one of the most essential questions that we're going to be working on as a group.
Yeah, I wonder if we also in that answer answered Rich Murray's question. Rich, if we didn't, maybe ping us again, or you can feel free to unmute. And then we'll go back to Elizabeth. I didn't forget you.
Oh, someone asked the question,
Okay, great.
does participating in this project make one a PCC member?
I think it should. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So Elizabeth asks, is this initiative connected to the LD4 community? I'm going to let Crystal take that one. This is her group. This is her people.
I'm part of the LD4 community in the LD4 Wikidata Affinity group. And yes, that working group will be working on the Wikidata community of practice. So yes. I don't know. I think Eric is here as well. I think a lot of folks from the LD4 Wikidata. I see Susan here. So yes.
The communities are not unaware of each other. Let's just say that. I think there's very much going to be a lot of coordination. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no need to reinvent the wheel for sure.
No wheels will be invented there.
All right. So we got Rich. Thank you. So hi, Ruth. I think this does help because Mike doesn't want to make commitment. And there are a subset of us who can do Wikidata. We can consider committing more later. Ruth, was that in reference to like EMCO, you are a member? Or I'm curious what I missed
Oh,
where that
yeah, that
came in
was
during.
institutional commitments.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. My own institution's down too many people. It's my own institution isn't a member, but we've got lots of individuals participating and we're allowing like professional development time for them to do that. So yes, I think however you're able to participate and whenever you can, we're here and we're ready to welcome you. That's it. So Robin had another comment about the, individual versus institution. Yep.
Oh, Robert asks, would EMCO members be able to help with UW's RDA and RDF work? Anyone can help with UW's RDA and RDF work. Come on down. Yes, please help with that. You don't have to be an EMCO member. Yes. We need help. Jeanette asks, will entities that we create in these registries be linked to bibliographic records? If so, will there be instructions or guidelines on how to do this? And would these records need to be coded as PCC records? I think, Jeanette, all of those questions are ones that we're trying to answer with the early adopter phase. I think it will be likely that entities we create in these registries will be linked to bibliographic records. I think that would be probably our goal in creating them in the first place. But instructions or guidelines on how to do it. Most registries have instructions or guidelines already. And if they don't exist, we're hoping that registry communities will begin putting them together. They don't exist already. That's what this phase is for, and what putting together this program is meant to do. Jennifer, is that?
Yep, that's how I understand it. And yeah, and we would love to get this question of can they be coded PCC, i.e. authenticated BibCo or concert records. That's the question we need to answer. We need to get to. So more on that. Okay, I think we got to Isabel's question. Thanks, Robin. There's a suggestion from Ruth about, I assume, putting a link on the PCC website, which I agree. We should probably look at that again. If we can't get a tab, can we at least find some other way to link to EMCO? Let me know about that. Okay.
Near the top. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
And then yes, it is okay to use your Gmail account.
Yeah, I've actually we've had instances when somebody moves to a new institution where PCC documents draft, mostly like working documents, things that most of the community won't even know about, but if you're on a committee or you're on a task group and then that document disappears because the 30 days had passed and the institution's deleted the user account, like that is bad. So I actually swapped over recently, thanks to Poco Chairs for handling all that, to using like my own like personal professional Gmail account instead of my institution account, because that will help with longevity and people migrate, it's fine, life happens. So yes, we do have a PCC Google Drive for EMCO. We're still working out how to add 200 plus people to that. And then yeah, I would recommend a Gmail account that's not associated with an institution as kind of a best practice. We don't want things to disappear if you make a move.
Ian asks a good question about how work will be coordinated if you only create NACO and ISNI records, but not Wikidata records. We've worked on structuring EMCO so that there's a there's a coordination committee that is sort of between IMAC and the communities of practice that is a coordination committee. And registry coordinators from each community of practice work together to communicate practices and crosswalks and deal with sort of coordinating using URIs from different registries and all of that together in this one body that represents all of the different communities of practice in EMCO. So we're hoping that that group will enable EMCO to coordinate folks who are not using all of the registries, because no one can work in every linked data registry. That's way too much. We have only 24 hours in the day.
And we were also very hesitant to build in duplication of effort. So that's another, yeah. Amanda, hello, says there are production expectations for being a PCC member. There sure is. There are no such expectations for EMCO right now. And so we can talk about what that looks like after the early adopters phase. But currently there's nothing. We wanted the bar to be low so that folks could just come in and figure out how to contribute on their terms.
Is EMCO planning to work on specific or different guidelines for Wikidata items? That is up to the Wikidata registry community. But that's a good question.
Certainly one of the things we want to come out of every community of practice is some guidelines and best practices. So I imagine, but again, let's not reinvent the wheel. We already had the LD4 community probably generating a lot of good practices. So maybe a first step, especially for a Wikidata community of practice, which is much more mature, is to just sort of take stock what exists already in terms of best practices. So I imagine all of that work will be part of the early adopter phase.
Rich has a really good question about discussing with BibCo and Conser whether those standards will be changed to allow records to include EMCO created access points and still be coded PCC. We have been discussing this at POCO with you know, with folks who are in charge of these BibCo and Conser standards. So those standards will be open for discussion. I think once we draw some conclusions at the end of the early adopter phase or towards the end of the early adopter phase, I think one of our outputs will be some discussion points with BibCo and Conser about potential changes to be made to those standards so that we can use EMCO, both maybe access points and especially URIs. Is that your understanding, Jennifer?
Yep. I'm reading ahead. I'm really sorry to folks who are having difficulty accessing the Google Doc. I had no idea until right now. There was a limit on users. Oh no. Well, I just closed mine too. Maybe one more person can elbow their way in. I'm so sorry. I didn't anticipate that. Wow.
Publish
Okay.
files more accessible.
Oh, interesting. Well, that might be something to look into. The Wikidata community of practice in particular is going to be pretty large, and we're going to want to be able to have people access documents.
Yeah, we just made it so that we had made it so that anyone with the link could edit.
Yep.
That's like Google isn't liking that.
Oh, okay.
It's like not enough because of how many.
All right. We will look into that. Sorry, folks. That was unanticipated.
It said publishing can fix it. Okay, sorry about that. That's never happened before to me.
Okay. It seems like a lot of the parameters are designed to be flexible because this is an early adoption, but I'm a bit confused about what projects will look like. Do you have an example of what would be within scope? Great question. So I think what ends up happening, so what ended up happening in the Wikidata pilot, for instance, is that folks designed their own projects and then just kind of carried those out. So I think what excepting for the warning, I guess, to not subvert other PCC policies like the Conser and BibCo. Make sure you read those manuals carefully before you start authenticating records, and make sure you're doing what the manual says. So other than that sort of warning or advisement, truly anything could be within scope. I'm hearing about academic libraries wanting to tackle projects to elevate women, I don't know, scientists or whomever at their institutions. What other things have we heard about? I don't know.
Well, wanting to create Wikidata items for faculty at their institution,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Folks wanting to explore using OCLC Meridian, or folks who want to use ISNI. A lot of this work folks are already doing. And
Mhm.
like at the University of Washington, we're kind of already using Wikidata in a lot of our work from the PCC Wikidata pilot. So we're probably just going to be continuing a lot of the stuff that we had already started, and trying to figure out, trying to kind of poke at questions about how we make that work interact with our NACO work, and exposing some of the ways that that our Wikidata work maybe doesn't fit into our BibCo records, and saying, these are our questions. So yeah, I think that the registry communities are going to need to figure out what participation looks like for them and what sorts of entities they want to create for their bibliographic records.
And earlier we sort of highlighted the registries people were interested in, and not all of them can be edited. Like you can edit your ORCID record, but I don't think ORCID any longer. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think it lets you just edit anybody's record anymore. So the participant may be just looking to figure out how to leverage. Somebody had actually said something about working with ORCID IDs and faculty research, or sort of elevating the profile of the institution via using ORCID identifiers. So that, using an identifier instead of maybe editing one is also an acceptable project, I think, for EMCO. You don't have to be in there in the weeds creating entities. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to deploy entities in your archive space. We saw at least one person who was interested in that. So that seems in scope to me. We had a related question. Oh, I lost it. Oh no. Maybe not. Oh.
A project section. Someone was asking yesterday about a way for folks to kind of share their projects, like for everyone in EMCO to sort of have like a show and tell where everyone can share their projects with one another. And that seems like a really, really good idea. But we don't have that yet. We should probably set one up.
So that can happen at the EMCO level, the sort of sharing across the different registries. But I do imagine that, say, because Robin asked about wiki. Oh no, I lost your comment already. There it goes. Projects. Yeah. One of the many things we will be IMAC, PCC IMAC committee, will be asking for is some sort of hopefully automatable statistics. And that's easier to do in Wikidata. We did it with a pilot and it's beautiful. And there was a way to set up a campaign, and under the campaign there were, I think they were called projects. And then each institution had their own project, and in this case, an individual could have their own project. And so that would be one way within the registry community to sort of keep track of who's working on what, and maybe find co-collaborators or other sorts of working together on these common problems.
Karen
Yep,
has
exactly, Susan. Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Karen
let's get to Karen's.
question
Mhm.
about deconflicting entity management, so multiple entities aren't created for the same entity. And within each registry, the registry communities need to figure out how that's done within their registry. But the sort of beautiful thing about linked open data is that it's okay for different registries to have different entities for the same real world object. It's actually kind of encouraged. So, say NACO has an entity for Jennifer Liss and Wikidata has an entity for Jennifer Liss. All you need is to assert that those two entities refer to the same person. Then people in both registries can say things about her and the semantic web is enriched. And so I think what we need to focus on really is managing our deduplication within registries and then reconciling between registries to make our linked data efforts function. So I hope that answers your question, Karen.
Isabel asks us, what do you want us to track in EMCO? So that EMCO is comprised of many different registries, potentially. And so IMAC had a real heck of a time trying to figure out what would be appropriate to ask for that would be relevant across all of these registries, some of which you can't actually edit, like ORCID, right? I can edit one record in ORCID, only mine. So we were going to wait till the registry community of practices get going. In Wikidata, we actually have a really good idea of what to ask for, but not so much in some of the other registries. So more on that soon. I'm sorry we can't give you a good answer, but it's because we're opening up the door to potentially any registry, some of which you can edit, some that you can't. So we want to make sure we're asking for things that are even fair to report across all registries. Bosma has a great question about a mark change. I'm just going to copy and paste your question and put that aside because I don't have a ready answer for you that involves a process. And I think maybe IMAC can just look at it, don't you think, Crystal?
I mean,
So we don't necessarily have to answer this right here. Bosma, if we have your email, maybe we could reach out to you later as well.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious to know a little bit more, actually, now that I've read it more closely.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. So let's put a pin in that and come back to it. Thank you. I appreciate that, though. Okay. Wow. I'm still deep in it. Let's see. What's this one?
All right. Tiziana has the Library of Congress. Oh, Tiziana has a really good question about data modeling. So will this group play a role in addressing the issue of sort of conceptualizing entities for agents? The Library of Congress has yet to establish a mapping to translate the name authority file into BibFrame entities. Will this group play a role in addressing this issue by advocating for agents to be managed with all the necessary attributes for proper identification and disambiguation? I think that folks in this group could ask for that, but that issue is really probably within the purview of the BibFrame and interoperability group. And it's really a BibFrame issue rather than an entity management issue, probably. And
That being said, though, EMCO is a vehicle for kicking the tires, right?
Mhm.
Testing out all of this in a real world environment. And so if there was some tension between the models, then we should definitely be surfacing that to other groups that could maybe perhaps address this. So
Definitely. Yeah, it is difficult
yeah.
to conceptually model the name authority file. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep. Great question. I love it. Right to the heart of the question. Yeah. Great. Okay. Wow, they're still coming in. So
Ooh, yes.
wow. Love
Dina,
this.
that is such a good question. Will there be a space for broader discussions on social political aspects of Wikidata's schema and how it may affect the visibility of some entities? Yes, I think that Wikidata, um, the Wikidata community of practice should have plenty of space for such discussions. Um,
This was answering my question. Thank you. And hello. Good to see you. All right. So would EMCO be discussing options to motivate participation and ways to integrate EMCO work with staff workload? Yeah. I think that's a good topic. Don't you? Ultimately, we want to make work that isn't going to be burdensome for everyone. So that sounds like a great topic. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna just put that aside. Thank you. I'm gonna think about adding that to our if not our goals document, then our just sort of outcomes that we want to see.
yeah. Susan asked a question about institution versus individual sign up. I think if you all talk amongst yourselves and want to switch over to institution, feel free, just send us an email. And if you want to check on it, you can send us an email too. We don't mind emails. Tim brings up meta registry would be desirable. Cooperation and resource sharing, it makes sense to coordinate at some point so we're not duplicating effort. Yes. We are trying super hard not to duplicate effort. We're also mindful that that folks want to use the registry of choice, and it's unlikely that the PCC is going to decide on one registry to rule them all.
All right, Heather says we created a local names vocabulary for people associated with our institution and would like to link these in Wikidata. That's incredible. Great project. Yep, similar, great. Okay, more people agreeing that that's a great thing to do. Awesome. I'm starting to see some of the comments being about like what we hope to accomplish in terms of projects or outcomes. That's good.
Ian has a good questions about having a quality team that we'd be able to contact if we've had to correct a record so that the other platforms can also be checked. And this is something that maybe we can talk about at the coordination level because it's important. It's an important part of this work. Like when a lot of errors move downstream and get duplicated. So when you see, a bad sandwich in one registry, it often gets duplicated in all the other registries because they sort of feed into each other. And so, yeah, that's a really great idea, Ian, and something that we should discuss as part of this early adopter phase.
So I'm seeing a question from Ruth about OCLC entities. I know that someone is here from OCLC and I don't necessarily want to put them on the spot, but if this is the time to chime in, if you would like to do so.
Sure. Yes. Someone mysterious from OCLC.
Someone.
I'm Ann Washington, and I'm on the IMAC group, so I'll be part of the group working together as we kind of move through this. And I think these are some great questions about sort of longevity, commitment to persistence, and things like that. And just in terms of, you mentioned specifically the OCLC work. Some folks might be familiar with some of the other entities or identities projects that were coming out of the research realm, and it doesn't make a difference as to probably to y'all like what sort of arm it comes out of, but this is actually part of our product world now. And what does that mean is we have dedicated developers, teams, quality expectations and processes, as well as, if you've ever got kind of service alerts for something being down and things like that, it's all plugged into that. And all of the IDs we use, we make sure that there aren't sort of like dead links at the end. We're using all of those technologies. So just to mention our commitment to service and persistence on there. And I think we also talked, I want to say on IMAC, a little bit about maybe some of this group is kind of coming up with some sort of expectations around registries or what we might, things that are typically used employ XYZ technology or something like that. So this reminds me that maybe that's something that we could include sort of in the broader view of all of this. And then there's a question about making connections between entities. I think this came up in another set of questions about sharing data, not wanting to duplicate work. And that's something that we've heard from an OCLC perspective as we've been talking about WorldCat entities. So we're kind of actively looking into ways that we can reduce the need for users to have to do that, and what sort of connections can we make. And I think I'm really looking forward to working with the group and learning about what they'd like to see, what challenges we're facing, and how we can support and respond to your what you're advocating for. So yeah, so I'm here, and if you have specific questions, I'll put my email in the chat, but I'll be hanging out with that group.
Thanks, Anne. Boy, there's still more questions. So we both responded to this already. So if signed up as an institution, do all folks working in EMCO have to be working in the same registry community group? Nicolette asks, and absolutely not. You can, several people as institutions and individuals said, I'm interested in 4 or 5 registries, and that's okay. No problem.
Sarah has a good question. The current registry options for the community of practice include Wikidata, ISNI, and WorldCat entities. Is this a closed list, or could other registry options be added for additional communities of practice? This is not a closed list. I think the only requirement is that there are maybe 2 people interested in contributing to a community of practice, and 1 person is willing to be a registry coordinator. So
In the form, we had to say something. And so we just sort of listed some that we knew people could edit. We thought about, I mean, it became clear later that we should have also just listed a bunch of registries that, while we may not be able to edit, people can use. So that was probably just an oversight on our part. But certainly that wasn't meant to be prescriptive at all. We had some interest in Getty vocabularies. I think ULAN was one of them. So that's, yeah, totally in scope.
Karen, your question about what format Wikidata uses to share the entities we create. Your institution uses Alma. I know that Alma's sort of enrichment process can use Wikidata. But I'm not sure what you mean by format.
So looking at the, hi, by the way, looking at the Ex Libris developer network, they're talking about different formats like BibFrame or JSON, RDA, RDF, like what format does Wikidata use to share so that whenever we talk to them about using the Wikidata for authority control or authority management, we can have a better conversation.
That's a really good question. I'm pretty sure that they use JSON.
Okay. Thank you.
For other Wikidata users, you can correct me on that, but I'm fairly certain it's JSON, if I remember correctly. Will EMCO be attempting to simplify and streamline entity creation to make it easier for non-elite libraries to participate, so that the project doesn't become primarily an initiative for well-funded, well-staffed academic institutions? Yes. I think that that's one of the also primary goals for EMCO, is to come up with some easier to follow documentation for entity creation in these registries, and to make it more inclusive.
One of the foundational reasons that EMCO started was because NACO training is just not even feasible for some. Remember the conversations about NACO Light? We decided that it was just still too much. There was no such thing as light, so we have EMCO now. I'm looking at time. We've got 4 minutes left. What do we
Probably,
need?
let's see. We should probably keep these extra questions in the chat and answer them on the EMCO listserv or in a document. And we had some discussion and sharing prompts, which we all got to. You all had some excellent questions. Thank you so much for coming with questions today. We have got some information about next steps. Jennifer, I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, I could wing through those really quick. So the next step is getting these communities of practice sort of convened and organized. So IMAC members participating in each of these communities will reach out soon to schedule initial meetings. And we expect that to just be next month sometime. All the announcements will go to the EMCO listserv. Again, if you're not on the EMCO listserv, there's a space in the agenda. Oh, where's the link? To add yourself, or get yourself added. And I do have it closed now, so I can't see how many people are there, but hopefully people can get in and access. So you will receive more information about how that's going to get going. The objectives for the first meeting should be fairly straightforward. And so, deciding how to select registry coordinators. And we kind of hope that that's done in March. We want to know who our coordinators are. But you should also be discussing, how frequently the community of practices should meet. We want these meetings to be accessible, and so you're gonna have to come up with some creative ways to accommodate all the time zones. If you're wondering at the weird timing of our two meetings, that was why we had to meet with the other hemisphere. So yeah, and then if there's time, the community of practice meetings, at these meetings, you can begin identifying where is the existing documentation, and what best practices already exist. So yeah, Crystal, cut you off, sorry.
Sorry, IMAC welcomes input on EMCO and further questions. Please feel free to email us or send feedback and questions by using the survey form at this link or by scanning the QR code on this slide. We've got our emails up here, and Jennifer just put in our emails, which I was hastily trying to type when I was supposed to be talking. So if you didn't receive the, oh, good. Thanks, Sai. I'm glad that the agenda now works. So if you didn't receive emails, please put your email address in the agenda in the indicated space, or email myself or Jennifer to let us know to put you on the list. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for your excellent questions. We're really looking forward to working with you on EMCO.
Crystal, I'm saving the chat now because I don't lose these questions. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you. Okay. Do you want to stop the recording?